In breaking news, you see there 2 Palestinian teenagers have been injured by Israeli gunfire. Also in Gaza, the latest raid targeted a building in the east of Gaza City, not being the one that you see on your screen in terms of the breaking news. Now earlier, another airstrike killed an elderly man and his daughter in a refugee camp in the north. A teenage boy was also targeted on his way to school on Monday. Egypt has said Israel and Palestinian resistance groups in Gaza have agreed to a truce, but the Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement says it is ready to respect the ceasefire only if Tel Aviv ends its aggression. This comes as the Israeli Prime Minister has promised to continue attacks on Gaza. An elderly man and his daughter in a refugee camp in the north. The teenage boy was also targeted on his way to school on Monday. Egypt has said Israel and Palestinian resistance groups in Gaza have agreed to a truce, but the Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement says it is ready to respect the ceasefire only if Tel Aviv ends its aggression. This comes as the Israeli Prime Minister has promised to continue attacks on Gaza. Egypt's collision course with Israel has taken a new turn. Lawmakers in Cairo have unanimously approved a motion which explicitly describes Tel Aviv as their country's #1 enemy. Now, the motion also calls for the expulsion of the Israeli ambassador to Cairo and a halt to gas exports to Israel.
Israel is our country's first and foremost enemy. That statement is what Egyptian MPs unanimously voted for in a motion passed on Monday. The motion calls for the expulsion of the Israeli ambassador to Cairo and recalling of the Egyptian envoy to Tel Aviv. The parliamentarians have demanded a complete revision of all agreements with Israel, including the infamous 1979 peace treaty. And they've also called on the government to cut the export of natural gas to Israel. The issue is of strategic importance to Israel and has caused controversy in Egypt for a long time. This because of the country's own natural gas needs, as well as the price of the exported gas, which is lower than international rates. Calls for the cutting of ties with Tel Aviv have been growing louder and louder since the country's revolution that led to the ouster of former dictator and Israel's closest Arab ally, Hosni Mubarak. Such sentiment culminated in several days of protests outside the Israeli embassy in Cairo last year. The protesters tried to break into the embassy building. Many of them were injured in clashes with security forces. The overthrow of Mubarak sounded the alarm for many politicians in Israel and the US. Some analysts say the anti-Israeli motion is a clear indication that Egyptians will no longer tolerate policies dictated by foreign powers.
But this sentiment that was expressed by the unanimous vote in Parliament is a measure of the anger and the determination of the Egyptian people, whose resistance to the Mubarak regime was not just against an individual, but against that handful of people, that ruling group in Egypt aligned with the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, which suppresses the Egyptian population and aligns the Egyptian population and their nation with the Zionist state and with U.S. imperialism.
Following the ouster of Mubarak last year, U.S. President Barack Obama pledged that Washington will support the Egyptian people's democratic aspirations.
The people of Egypt have spoken, their voices have been heard, and Egypt will never be the same. The United States will continue to be a friend and partner to Egypt. We stand ready to provide whatever assistance is necessary and asked for to pursue a credible transition to a democracy.
Now the Egyptians are waiting to see Washington's reactions to calls made by their representatives in Parliament.